Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome to the show, everyone. We are so excited to be welcoming Melissa Parker to the show today. Melissa is a plural therapist with some really wonderful specialties. And we have been so lucky to have the opportunity to get to know them a little bit better. And truthfully, we actually got to hear their talk at a Healing Together conference a couple of years ago, and we're completely mesmerized by it. So if you don't already know them, we know that you are going to love them. So first, welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you.
What would you most like people to know about you, the folks that are listening today?
That we, over the past 4 or so years since we've been out as a plural therapist, we have been so wonderfully surprised and privileged to meet so many amazing people and to be part of such a strong and vibrant community. And we're just so happy to be here having a conversation with you today. We've missed talking. We've missed seeing you. It's great to be here.
Really excited about just conversations that we can have. I know one of your areas of knowledge is psychedelics, and I know it's also something that lots of people in the plural community are really interested in and have lots of questions about. First, just curious, how did you become interested in psychedelics?
Let's see, we were diagnosed as DID, gosh, we were 32 or 33, so that was about 17 or 18 years ago. We were in the middle of a really hard time in the life. We were really depressed, we were really suicidal, we were really overwhelmed. And then the diagnosis of DID, our entire frame of reference for that was like Sybil. So we were like, oh, damn, this is very bad. And the way that this was communicated to us wasn't really super great either. On one hand, it made total sense. Oh yeah, this explains, I don't know, everything. And then on another hand, it was like, oh, and yeah, we're just gonna be bananas for the rest of our life. This is great. So we were up to our eyeballs in just stress and depression and fear and worry and all this stuff and exhausted. And a friend of ours was like, hey, I've got some MDMA. Why don't you just take a break? It'll just help you chill out and relax. And seeing as we were kind of suicidal anyway, we were like, yeah, what can it hurt? So we took the MDMA. We thought we were going to have, some type of a lighthearted social experience. We figured it would be fun. And it was. And it also brought us into full contact with our system right off the bat. It also kind of created, not in a bad way, but a confrontation with the system and with every last bit of trauma we've ever experienced. It was unexpected. At the time, it was almost unwelcome, but not really, and helped us come to terms with having DID being a system and our trauma. So, hopped on the internet after the experience, looking up MDMA, in Google, and found maps. And we found out that people already knew about this. And that even more than that, they had been working on an assisted psychotherapy protocol for using MDMA as an adjunct to psychotherapy. And our minds were just blown. It was like crazy. So we really were in a place where we were thinking about our lives and what we were doing. We had been a hairdresser for most of our adult lives and really loved it, but also felt like our time doing that work was coming to a close. And at about that time too, we were really coming into contact with a voice in our head that we later realized was a system member, a guide of sorts. And it was like, hey, you need to go to school. We need to be a therapist. You need to go to school. You've got to do that psychedelic assisted therapy thing. Okay, that sounded bananas, right? We're basically a high school dropout. We did get a diploma, but we pretty much stopped going to school at about 15 or 16, spent a couple of years in institutions, not educated, didn't know how to do homework, none of this stuff. It was completely intimidating. But this member of our system was persistent and was like, no, you've got to do this. You just get a BA, then you go get a master's degree, then you go get a license. Then by then the drugs are going to be legal and you can go and do the thing. So that's what brought us here.
That is a great journey, full of challenges. But I mean, thinking about, gosh, just thinking about coming into contact with your system, becoming familiar with them unexpectedly, which I have so many reactions to that because I'm thinking, wow, that's overwhelming. That's a
Oh, it
lot.
was.
There's like my other thought is like, talk about some like gigantic distress tolerance on your part. Like just it's a lot.
That's what the MDMA helped with, was the distress tolerance. Like I remember at one point just looking like I'm watching this horrific movie of our life, just awful, basically from the very beginning to the point that we were at, and just watching every last crappy thing. And it was a long movie, I'll tell you that. And just going, oh, wow, wow, that sucks. Wow, oh, that makes sense. Oh, now I understand that better. Oh, wow. Oh, ouch. Like literally like that, but also kind of in this protected space that was created by the MDMA, where we had complete compassion for ourselves, our system, and our experience. And just kind of going, oh, wow, this is horrible, but not going into the self-hate, not going into any type of horrible fear, but just finally really understanding and seeing the lay of the land and seeing what brought us to being who and how we all are.
Mm. I love the piece about compassion because sometimes I feel like self-hate can be so reflexive. Sometimes I think it's protective too. You know, if you hate
Mhm.
yourself enough, then what happened doesn't hurt quite as much as when you have a lot of compassion for yourself.
Yeah,
I'm projecting. That's my experience at times.
no, that's been part of ours too. And not, one thing about MDMA that's extraordinary is that you get this traction. You get these threads that you pull out that you keep after the acute drug experience is over, that you can keep, that you can stay in contact with. So it's not that, we've held all this and been like, okay, this is great. We have DID. This makes sense. Yay, let's go have a nice day. But it was like, oh, okay, we have a basis of understanding that will allow us to live through this process.
That's important.
I think for us, it's been life-saving.
And that's profound. That's the part that I think is so important for people to understand. There are a lot of people that don't understand the use of psychedelics in mental health and how it can be beneficial. And I think there's a lot of rumors going on out there. And I'm also hearing things about who, like, quote, can and can't participate in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. For example, I went to a workshop about a year ago from a psychiatrist who was working for a higher level of care who said that particular program will never do it with anybody who has dissociation or complex dissociation. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
I think it's absolutely bananas. So those of us who have dissociation, especially those of us who have what they call the dissociative disorders, right? We live in the state where we are dissociative, where we do have these incredible minds that go off into so many different directions and are so well resourced. I think if anything, we're set up for this. We're set up for psychedelic work. I don't know about you or anybody else, but a lot of our experience is sure in ordinary reality, but also is a non-ordinary reality. I mean, we were hearing voices that, sure, I could have been diagnosed as schizophrenic. I think I have been actually. Who hasn't, right? But having these experiences with non-ordinary reality, having different experiences of the body, of time, of place, of sensation, of sensory input, which is so common for so many of us, I think actually positions us really well to take very well to psychedelic assisted therapies. I mean, of course, just like with anybody, there's a need to get as much consent as possible through the system. There is a need to help people understand what's going on and why. There's a need to look for any landmines that we could fall in and try to work with that as well as possible preemptively or in the moment. But I don't think that we are any more vulnerable to harm than any other diagnostic group of people. I mean, even just looking at the MAP studies, right? The folks who had dissociative type amnesia, I'm blanking on the number right now. It's been a really hard day, but the folks who had dissociative type amnesia did just as well, if not better. Not, I'm sorry, I did not say that right. Not dissociative type amnesia, dissociative type PTSD. It has been a long day. Who had dissociative type PTSD did better than a lot of the folks who didn't. What does that suggest to you? To me, it suggests home field advantage of being familiar with dissociation and substances that might create similar circumstances.
That's so interesting and really helpful for people who are interested in trying it, but potentially whose providers have discouraged them or turned them away from it based on a belief that doesn't sound like it's supported, certainly in literature or in the research.
And they haven't done a lot of research on us. I mean, DID is one of the exclusion points of the clinical trials with psychedelics right now. And there's this idea, I think, that we're too complicated, that there's possible, too much can go wrong. And sure, I'm not trying to say that psychedelics are always safe and happy and all of that. I'm not trying to say that psychedelics are not without flaws and psychedelic therapies are not without flaws. Clearly, there are flaws. Clearly, there are concerns. But I don't believe that just having OSDD or DID or even dissociative type PTSD is in of itself a deal breaker. I don't believe it should be. I don't believe really any diagnostic category in itself should be. I believe looking at somebody's life, do they have supports for doing this work? Are you in a place where this makes sense, where this is a good idea? I don't care if somebody has MDD or DID. There can be dangers for either person in either category, depending on the circumstances of their day life, depending on where they're at in therapy. And if you can deal with the really profound changes and shifts that can occur as a result of this type of work, and that can occur rather quickly.
The reaction that I'm having in my head is literally like you're talking about treating the individual.
Mhm.
And part of me is like, why is that so profound? Why? That's what we're supposed to be doing.
I
You know what I
know.
mean?
No, I'm laughing because this makes me really
Like,
angry. And we laugh sometimes when we're mad. But yeah, like we're actually talking about addressing the root of folks' trauma. And no, this isn't a magic wand. It's not necessarily going to make everything all better, but it might help. There's strong evidence to suggest that it will. So I don't know why people are so adverse to treating trauma at the root cause rather than at symptom expression level. I mean, we were on drugs for years, given to us by psychiatrists, that just made us dull, that made us stuck in our body, that made us feel sick all the time, that made it impossible for us to connect with other people. And I'm not totally downing traditional psychopharm. I do believe it can be helpful, but I think DID folk disproportionately get over medicated or wrongly medicated in ways that's actually really harmful to having relationships with members of system.
that is a very relatable experience.
There's not a pill for what we have, but there are some compounds that can be significantly helpful.
Sometimes, historically, at least our experience has been that people would be really quick to push fistfuls of medication, I think, in an attempt to probably shut me up, but also, some type of attempt to quell symptoms, which to your point doesn't actually get to any root cause. It's not a holistic view of treating a human being versus what you were just talking about, which seems like it should be standard of care and common sense. Can we treat each individual in their unique, presentations and expressions based on just those things,
Right.
the uniqueness of themselves. And apparently it's a novel idea sometimes.
I think people are scared because I think there's a lot of distortions and false beliefs about what DID and plurality and multiplicity actually are. I think for a really long time, the narrative has been controlled by people who are assuming based on their life experiences and their identity who we are. And I think we're having a pretty intense cultural moment right now as a community where more people are coming out in different factions of society and are talking about their experiences and are sometimes violently even being told, no, we're the experts, we're the sane people, what you're saying is wrong. And it's like, no, dude, we're telling you the truth. You can listen to it or not, but that's not going to change the truth. And I think because there's so much fear and distortion, that it's, oh no, like what if we give them MDMA and they do the therapy and a child part comes out? I don't know, maybe you might want to talk to the kid. I know that's a radical idea in some,
Novel idea.
but I think it's necessary and I think it's good. Everybody has kid parts. It's just, are we talking DID context? Are we talking singleton context? Are we talking something in between? But how do you not talk to younger aspects of self or system? How do you not interact with the whole person, system, self, whomever you're sitting with? How do you get around doing that?
Not very effectively.
Well, right. That's
you
what people are in therapy for
know,
20 or 30 years, and they're still suffering as much as they were in their first round of therapy. This is why trauma therapy for folks with DID is not ending. It just keeps on because there's so much harm done in therapy that I don't know about you or anybody else, but we're in therapy right now, largely, well, in some large part, because of therapy we've had.
right. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm actually sorry that that's your experience. I'm sorry it's mine as well.
Yeah.
And it actually speaks to something that I was just thinking. I had a provider who's actually a very good and talented provider, is very good with DID and OSDD, really gets it. Make a comment about somebody recently sounding angry. And it's, as we're talking, I'm realizing that I think it's worth just pausing for a moment to explain to people that when you've had the experience of being gaslit, mistreated, actually even outright abused in treatment,
Mhm.
that the anger is pretty normal and expected
And healthy.
and valid and healthy. The fact that it exists does not discount that there are good providers out there. Like
Mhm.
we can both acknowledge there are good providers out there.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, historically, that wasn't my personal experience, and it sure doesn't sound like it was your personal experience.
No, we spent 2 years in different institutions. In one institution, every time we dissociated, they put us in restraints and gave us medication.
Case in point of mistreatment, that's
Yeah.
not standard of care for how we treat somebody who's dissociating.
No.
And understandable, right? Why there would be anger, resentment, and all sorts of feelings. I have plenty of my own that related to things that we lived through back then.
I'm not sure why anger is so pathologized. I don't know why it's so feared or why it's considered so unusual. I mean,
Yeah, I'm sometimes I think that it gets, I don't know, maybe for the practitioners who are good, that they're feeling like they're not getting
Mhm.
the maybe the acknowledgement that there are good people out there, that somehow maybe telling our stories that are painful, awful at the hands of providers would somehow, I don't know, would somehow steer people away from looking for good providers. So I guess I just felt compelled based on the fact that it was a recent conversation to say, we're not saying that good providers don't exist. And the experiences that we've had are valid and deserve airtime. And other people can learn from them.
Right. You can learn what not to do, right?
Yes.
And it's rough if somebody is hearing all of our stories and personalizing that and feeling like we're talking about all providers, but not all providers, right?
Right. 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 It's funny. And it was actually somebody else that was speaking who was angry, but it just for some reason it all popped into my head, and I thought, now's probably a good time to just acknowledge that dynamic because I'm sure
Yeah.
someone is having that reaction out there somewhere.
And it's hard, but also I think part of being an ally, part of being an accomplice
Yeah.
is holding space while people speak their truth and holding our feelings about what we're hearing. It's not
Yeah.
it I understand people having feelings. We're all human, and sure, we all have the feelings whether we like it or not. But I also think that sometimes, feelings are important, super important, don't get me wrong, but they're not the only thing that's important.
Agreed. And also, at what point did it become a rule that people are only allowed to share their experience if it's positive?
Or non-threatening or not hurtful or not confusing to somebody else.
Those two. Yes.
Yeah.
The reality is, like, not everybody's story is positive.
No, and some people's stories are positive, and that's absolutely wonderful. I want to hear more
Mhm.
of those stories, right? I want to hear more of people saying, hey, I had a pretty decent experience of X, Y, and Z. I want to hear more of that. And the people who haven't had that experience also deserve space
Yeah.
and kindness and compassion and to be received well and saying what they have to say too.
Agree 1000%. And the more people that also hear those stories, particularly if they're providers, those providers hopefully will be less likely to be causing harm because those stories will be in the forefront of their mind as they are delivering care to other people. So,
Yeah. I think there's a lot of hope. I think I'm seeing different ideas and more curiosity and more expansiveness in a lot of up and coming clinicians. I think, some people are set in their ways and they just need to believe what they need to believe to preserve their sense of themselves. And we can't do much about that. I'm not even going to try. But I think there are a lot of people who are maybe early middle stages of career who are really starting to listen, who are really curious, who are really responsive to learn about what they don't know from people who have experienced it. And that's where I'm putting most of my energy.
such a productive place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
With a recently with a friend, we had the just pleasure really of presenting an introductory workshop at a conference. And it was really, really cool to see how many people were like, I did not know DID was that prevalent. I had no idea that OSDD was that prevalent. Oh my goodness, when I listened to you, I am pretty sure I have at least two people on my caseload right now, and I didn't see it.
Yeah.
That they're really open to it, which was
Uh-huh.
really nice because years ago, I did not feel like that was the case.
No.
Didn't even feel like a workshop proposal like that would be accepted, actually. And so it is really nice to see some of the inroads that people are making because of people like you being willing to put yourself out there often. And it hasn't been an easy road for you at all.
No.
Right.
No,
Right.
it hasn't.
Understatement of the year, potentially century.
It's been hard. A lot of people hate me just for being who I am. And they feel very comfortable in communicating their hatred. I mean, it's gotten better since I got off the DeSoc listserv. People have stopped emailing me direct threats and stuff, but it's not a friendly world. It's not friendly when you speak a truth that's offensive to somebody else's sensibility or sense of themselves. It's hard. And on one hand, okay, sure, I can understand this cognitively, but I can't support it.
Right. It's also devastating because I think that or feel like or I guess wish that our field was by nature more inclusive.
It's kind of weird that it's not, right?
It hasn't, I mean, it's so funny, but like it just funny meaning ironic. It to my knowledge, I don't know that it ever has been.
No.
The place in our field where I've seen more inclusion has been in the subfield of addiction.
Mhm,
They've had a lot of inclusivity there with all different types and iterations of addiction and professionals who have struggled with substance use disorders.
mhm,
I've seen, I mean, gosh, it wasn't until early, probably 2004-ish, when I feel like the eating disorder community became more inclusive. in terms of different iterations of professionals with lived experience, it's been really slow.
Yeah.
And it was almost if somebody was out there with any disorder, but whether it was bipolar or a psychosis or fill in the blank, doesn't matter. People who were practicing seemed to meet the disclosure with shock
Yeah.
and dismay and some type of like shaming of the person who was disclosing rather than compassion. And it was always baffling to me that a profession that's supposed to hold and honor every human's capacity for healing in such high regard, and yet it's just been a really odd journey.
It's strange. I remember the incident that caused us to decide to come out was we were at a training. It was Janina Fisher. And now we had quoted her all through undergrad and grad school in papers. We thought she was awesome, had all of her stuff. We were really excited to go to a local training here in the Boston area a few years back. Maybe it was 2019. I don't know, time isn't our strong suit, but it was definitely before the pandemic. And we were sitting in this huge auditorium full of therapists, and it was a training on dissociation. And Janina Fisher just kept cracking jokes, one after another, that were really degrading about her clients, about other people's clients. And we remember just sitting around this auditorium, stone cold, like our body was just stone cold, and just looking around in horror as all of these people who were there ostensibly to learn about how to help people with, the type of trauma that gets you DID, which is pretty intense trauma, were laughing their butts off. After the horror faded, I mean, I think I don't even know how we got through the afternoon and went home and just stared at a wall and just started writing our first workshop for Healing Together, which is called Fly on the Wall. And it was an anti-ableism workshop about being a therapist with DID who nobody knew had DID, listening to the things that people said about people's DID. And that's how we came out. I mean, partly because we didn't want anybody else to control our narrative. We didn't want anybody else to say anything about us that we hadn't said for ourselves. And we knew we're mouthy. I mean, we do tick people off. We knew it was inevitable that eventually, if we didn't out ourselves, somebody else would. And we also just really wanted to say, hey, you know what? We're here and we hear everything that you're saying about people like us, sometimes even to our face. And you're wrong. And here's why.
Yeah.
But it was a shock. I mean, this was one of our, not quite heroes, but somebody that we really looked up to clinically as far as how they did the thing they did. And if I hadn't known better and we had just walked into that room randomly, we would have thought it was a comedy routine against trauma survivors.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's awful.
We're still, years later, we're still chewing that over and unpacking that.
I actually don't doubt it at all. I had shared I don't remember what episode, there's an episode I did on the podcast about when therapy is harmful that just talked about a recent therapist that we had who was very similar and interestingly enough was actually in a peer supervision group with Janina. So it wasn't in an auditorium with other therapists, but it was a therapist sitting in front of me, degrading people with DID, cracking jokes about it, and also talking about her other clients, not revealing like HIPAA protected identifying information. But, 20 seconds into all of this, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, oh, and this is what she thinks about us. And this is the way she talks about us to other people. And it was really disturbing. And I worry about the environment that allows that because therapy is about, in our opinion, the relationship is a vehicle for healing. It needs to be a compassionate, accepting, loving vehicle. Sometimes people get weird when you say the word love in response to therapy, but I think love is part of it.
We agree. I mean, if we didn't have love for ourselves and our community and folks like us, we wouldn't have any business doing this work.
Right. Yeah. We still have plenty of work to do to hopefully help
Oh my
the
God, don't
field
we?
move forward, gosh.
Yeah. No, it's a lot, and it's also really wonderful work. I mean, we're talking about the things that aren't working. We're talking about the reasons why people are getting bad therapy all too often. We're talking about the really tough stuff, but we're not also talking about the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
and the good stuff is still there. I don't think we have to talk about it too much because that's not the problem. But it's there.
Well, true.
And it's just as real.
Absolutely. It is beautiful to see people, I'm going to say, waking up,
Mhm.
realizing things like, this client that maybe has had, unfortunately, 10, 20, 30 years of interventions and treatment and therapy who's been stuck, being able to step back and realize, oh, wait, maybe they have dissociation. Let's look at their trauma.
Yeah.
What's back there? What did we miss? Rather than historically, when that was the case, I remember this well in the 90s, it was always not the fact that we were missing something. It was always you're treatment resistant. You don't want to get better. You're not invested. You're not trying hard enough.
Yep.
You're not following through. And there was no compassionate questioning around
Yeah.
what was really happening to make it appear that way.
Yeah.
It's nice to see people starting to ask the more compassionate questions around, you know, last week we talked about you're doing X, Y, and Z. Do you remember that? And
Mhm.
sometimes the person says, no, I don't remember that.
Right. If they feel safe enough to tell you that.
Yeah.
It's tough. And I think part of it is that, you can't help fix something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand dissociation. I don't think people understand this thing they call DID. I think there's a lot of ideas, like we were talking earlier. There's ideas and there's fears and there's all different lines of a very limited understanding.
Mhm.
And I think some people have been doing tremendously good work despite this. And that's awesome. And I think, some folks are just like, these people can't be treated. These people can't be helped. These people, these people, these people. And then when treatment really doesn't go well, then they get to pull the trump card and say that we have personality disorders and we should be treated behaviorally because we are angry or we are not treatment compliant or treatment resistant or we are manipulative or we are this or we are that. There's always an out. And it's horrifying, right? I mean, any therapist can sit in any room with any client and run screaming out of the room for no good reason and blame it on the client. And guess what? The client's cooked.
Which for people who don't understand that, it's the power differential.
Yep.
The therapist is holding the power whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
And you can be a good steward of that power and share it, be curious and compassionate, understand that your client's an expert on themselves,
Yeah.
or you can go in the other direction.
Yeah. Like when people get all bent over people self-diagnosing.
Good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we know how that's gone, right? We know how that continues to go. And I can say, in the past, maybe I'll even just say the past 4 years since I've been at this particular group practice, I've had a lot of folks come and self-diagnosed, and only one person was actually, in my opinion, incorrect. And we had a conversation about that, and they were relieved that they didn't have the ID. They were like, hey, I know you have it, no offense, but I'm glad that's not me. But I think people know themselves pretty well, and they might not get the nuance, they might not get the fine tune, but I think the first thing to say when somebody comes in saying, hey, I think I know something about myself is like, great, tell me all about it.
Yeah.
You can figure out how to navigate that as you go. There's no need to put yourself in the big chair and look down at this person and tell them that they don't have the right to know themselves.
Yeah.
That's a replication of so many different abuses. I think there's different ways, like, yeah, sure. As mental health professionals, we can't treat somebody for something they don't have because that would be harm. And I think there's also ways of finding out what people know about themselves and working collaboratively to figure out what the clinical picture is and how to proceed.
Yeah.
And if there's disagreement about what's being seen, you just have a conversation about it. It's not rocket science. You're like, hey, you're seeing this, I'm seeing this. Let's talk about it and how to proceed. But instead, it's almost like a colonizer type of effect. In effect, it's like, I know you and what you're dealing with better than you do. And I'm going to tell you all about it. And I'm going to give you this label that I think is correct. And I'm not going to listen to that because that's delusional or you're wrong or you've been on too many TikToks or I don't know.
There's an awful lot of privilege inherent in people who immediately say that no one should be accessing the information that's free on the internet. That was one of the biggest complaints, I guess, that I've heard some providers who are really against self-diagnosis say is, well, why would you be looking up that stuff? Just go to a provider. There's testing that can be done. There's evaluations that can be done. Not everybody has access to
Not
that.
every, there's not enough therapists.
That too.
Glad that people have social media for support and for education. Is it flawless? No, but is more, how do I put this? More, I'm blanking on the word, but is like the mental health establishment flawless? No.
Oh gosh.
Right. So, I mean, therapists do wrong, do harm, and screw up all the time. We're human. Okay, fine. But then sitting up on this high horse saying, well, TikTok has flaws, so you shouldn't listen to it. It's like, no, people are having their situation normalized. They're getting a vocabulary for what's going on. They feel a lot less alone and they have a means of talking about this. It's not perfect, no, but perfect isn't really criteria. It shouldn't be. But to say that, oh, this information shouldn't be readily available on social media, that's classist, that's elitist, that's ableist. I'm sorry, that's really fucked up.
And it happens all the time.
Oh, I know.
The what is it? Eight, 6 to 10 or 8 to 10 years is the average amount of time for somebody to be diagnosed with DID. Is that
Mhm.
right?
I think 7 or 8 years of treatment to get the diagnosis, then you're in treatment for like 7 to 10 years. I forget the stats, they're different depending on the source, but I think that's the rough of it.
So a long ass time
Yeah.
to be able to get an accurate diagnosis. So when you think about it, isn't it good that there's all this information now freely available, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or podcasts or books or whatever, that is leading people to a place where they go, wait, that actually sounds like what I experience.
Yep.
I wonder if maybe I should go see someone
Uh-huh.
and people could actually be identified and treated sooner. Why is that a bad thing?
And why is it bad for people to be empowered in their self-knowledge? Isn't that a step towards healing?
That's what I think many of us see it as,
Oh,
right?
well, we're crazy. The hell with
Oh,
that.
right. I forgot about that. Well, there's also the fact that the younger generation is much more open about their mental health.
Yeah.
Certainly than when I was younger, that was not something we talked about. If you
Nope.
went missing from school for mental health reason, you were helping your grandmother do something in Florida or whatever. Like it was, you were not, hospitalized for fill in the blank.
Nope.
But today, people are talking much more openly about their mental health struggles. So it doesn't actually surprise me that an adolescent, for example, might walk into a therapist's office or a psychiatrist's office and know this therapist, this psychiatrist is supposed to be a safe person who specializes in mental health. So I guess I can be really open about what it is that I think, feel, and what I'm experiencing. And what I've witnessed, sadly, is some maybe providers, not everybody, of course, but providers who are in an quote unquote older generation who see that as attention seeking behavior instead of recognizing that it's part of the culture of kids growing up today.
And what's wrong with seeking attention for something that is hurting you?
And then there's that.
Like, why shouldn't you be like, hey, yeah, over here, I need some help, and this is what I think is going on, and here's why. Why is that wrong?
It feels like there's an accusation that they're like fabricating it and making it up, that somehow their reports of distress are not real. And I've seen some instances of really having to go to bat and get multiple people of support to convince a provider. And I think when you get to that place, maybe you just need a different provider.
Agreed.
It's so complicated. I wish that it wasn't for people.
I wish there were enough resources. I mean, even now, I get a lot of requests for therapy. There's not a lot of people who work with DID and OSDD and plural folk who take insurance or who have an equitable sliding scale. And on one hand, okay, working with insurance as a therapist, I understand insurance is like, if I didn't know better, I would think they didn't want us to use it for mental health. Like they're making it harder and harder by the day to be able to be a functional therapist and take insurance.
Yeah.
And I still don't think that should be the client's problem. I still don't think that's between us and the insurance companies. That's not between us and the clients. I don't fault people for taking self-pay, but I do fault people for wanting $350 an hour or 45 minutes. When I was looking for a therapist a few years ago, I actually spoke to somebody who had the audacity to say to me, well, my usual rate's about 200, but you have DID, so that's like, 275, or I forgot what the number she said was. And I thought she was kidding, so I started laughing. I was like, okay, she's got a great sense of humor. This is going to be good. And then I heard silence, and I was like, oh, wait, that wasn't a joke. And then her parting line to me as I hung up the phone is, I'm sorry you can't afford therapy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like you can't make this up.
That's appalling.
Right? So this is what people are also up against in trying to find therapy, is that first of all, there's not enough therapists. Second of all, there's not enough therapists who understand and can work with plural folk. And then third of all, who can afford them?
Yeah.
There's not many of us in the Boston area who take insurance, especially not mass health
Yep.
and public insurances.
We see that a lot at our practice because we do take most insurances. And,
I bet. Yeah.
there's so many people who are unable to pay for therapy because, to your point, who has $200-300 a week? And some people go twice a week. So now who has $400-600 a week?
Right.
And yes, I agree. I absolutely am intimately acquainted with navigating insurance companies and the wages that they pay
Mhm.
therapists.
It's a problem.
It's time consuming. It's not compensated time. It's not effective. It's not efficient. And yet it's important that people be able to use those benefits because we want people to enjoy good mental health. If you don't have mental health, you don't have health.
Right. And then instead of compassionately responding to the mental health crisis, we're on the powers that be are getting offended that people are going on TikTok to find community and information.
And it can be the best information that they find.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And I'm
Yeah.
encouraged though
Yeah.
by there's a younger generation of therapists because people who know me know that I'm older now, but there's a younger generation of therapists
We're right there with you.
that that I have a lot of hope in them. They are outspoken, they are social justice oriented, they
Yep.
care deeply about their clients, they're willing to fight for a living wage. They're not happy about the fact that that time is not compensated, rightfully so,
Sure.
but it's a different group of folks coming in behind, and
Yep.
I'm really hopeful.
We are too. We love coming into contact with early stage therapists who are like, tell me about this, or where do I get a resource for this, or can we have a conversation about this? It's a really important way, I think, for people to connect and share information. And that's wonderful. And through social media, we've met so many wonderful people doing so much good work. We just need more of us, a lot more.
It's true.
But there is optimism. It's not all gloom and doom. It's just kind of gloomy doomy sometimes. But I am so optimistic about just, I sound so old saying it, but the younger generation.
It's true though. It's so true.
We hear ourselves say this stuff, and we're like, oh gosh, somebody in the system just said, well, that's because you're an old lady. I'm not.
I do love the younger parts though.
Oh, yeah.
They have some very interesting points to make on a regular basis.
Keeps us on our toes.
It sure does.
Yeah.
I think too, one of the great things is having places where, even if people are not able to immediately get themselves into treatment or therapy, that there are communities that they can be part of so that they don't feel alone.
Yeah.
They can learn a set of skills sometimes. I mean, for all the shit that social media has taken, there are people that have learned really useful skills
Yeah.
that they can use in the meantime. And even just knowing you're not alone.
Peer support is amazing. Peer support is amazing. It's where it's at. That's, yeah, very near and dear to our hearts.
It's important.
Peer work is amazing. And I'm not necessarily talking about agency peer work because peers are treated like crap in most social service agencies. They're underpaid, they're overworked, and they're stigmatized. But the peer work that goes on in different corners, the peer work that goes on independently. And this isn't in any disrespect to any peer workers working in any social service agency, absolutely not. But I just have trouble with how peers are treated.
Yeah.
In that way.
It goes back to the hierarchy that we were talking about earlier in many ways, right?
Well, and it also goes back to the fact, okay, so psychology, it's rooted in eugenics. Social work is rooted in policing. We're not too far from the roots of both modern social work and modern psychology. We're still very enmeshed. We're still very tied to the eugenicist values and the habit of policing in some way. This isn't gone yet. It's entrenched.
When you can find somebody who's practicing from a truly relational perspective, there's some magic there.
Absolutely.
And you have to find it.
Yeah.
Which isn't, to your point, it's not easy. There's not enough therapists. There's not enough people doing the work.
No. So if anything, we have a lot of gratitude for online peer support, for social media, for all the online communities that are popping up, that are being led by so many people with so many diverse lived experiences.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back for a second to psychedelics because I know that there are going to be people who are going to say, hey,
yeah,
if I want to try it and I think it could be helpful to me, and I have DID or I have OSDD, or I'm a therapist and I have a client, you know, where the heck do people start to even find care that is hopefully reputable and safe?
Above ground right now, except for ketamine assisted psychotherapy, there isn't any.
Do you see that changing soon? Do you know of any that might be coming down the pike that would open up like MDMA or psilocybin?
Massachusetts has a ballot initiative for plant-based medicines that I urge everybody to read up on, find out about, work to pass, and vote for. We can vote for that in November. And there's a process going on right now to approve the MAPS protocol for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. August 11th, I think we will have more information about whether or not the FDA is going to approve this. There has been some hubbub going on lately with some concerns expressed by outside agencies, evaluatory agencies, about the efficacy of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. There have been some claims that the research is skewed, that it's not helpful, that it's not safe. We feel this is really political. And there are concerns. There have been egregious abuses in the world of psychedelic assisted therapy on the regular. And this is a problem that many of us have been aware of way before this year. A lot of us have been following this for years, if not decades now. And it's difficult. I think that the abuses that are being discussed should be discussed and should be dealt with, and we should find ways to help support the victims of these abuses and also safeguard against them happening. But the problem is, this isn't just a psychedelic problem. This is a problem. Okay, I'm going to go into a little rant here. But white supremacy is like a giant tree with a lot of rotten branches. And some of those branches are sexism, are misogyny, are ableism. All the isms are the branches of this tree. And until we address the roots of this tree, we're not going to get anywhere. You can call this a psychedelic problem. You can say, well, this is just a problem because of psychedelics. And it's like, no. Most of the perpetrators, not all, but most, have been cisgendered, heterosexual white men of economic privilege and social status. This is our problem. It's not the damn psychedelics. It's worse in the terms of psychedelics because when people are hurt, in the context of psychedelics, they are really hurt. They are exponentially more hurt. And that is a terrible thing. However, there's all these claims that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy should not be approved because of the abuses. Well, where the heck were these people 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago as these abuses have been happening to try to stop it? So I've got all kinds of feelings. As a system, we have all kinds of feelings about that. And, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, psychedelics are not a magic bullet. And just like anything that has potential to heal, there's also great potential to harm. But the harm lies in the people. The harm lies in the people who decided to go off script, ignore the protocol, ignore all the ethics that were taught in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and just do their own thing. I am an alumni of MAPS, which is now Lycos, MDMA assisted psychotherapy training, and also of the California Institute of Integral Studies, Psychedelic Therapies and Research program. In both of these programs, one was a 9-month certificate program, one was a lot shorter, but still very comprehensive. A lot of our conversation is about ethics, is about using touch or not using touch, and discussing touch, is about how you can and can't enter into these situations and how you should conduct yourself. And the people who committed the abuses in these psychedelic research contexts and in some of these underground and mid-ground, for lack of a better term, therapeutic contexts, committed abuses because they went away from the ethics, not because they moved towards them. So there's a lot going on. There are a lot of concerns, and there should be. This is a powerful therapy. But I mean, we have like Effexor and lithium on the market. If we're concerned about having absolutely no health issues associated with MDMA legalization and approval, then why is this being held to a higher standard or a different standard than traditional psychopharm that we know, when it's not prescribed well or wisely, can cause people great harm? Why is this so different?
Yeah, when you say that, it makes me think back. I mean, we've had many psychotropic medications that have caused permanent damage to people.
Yeah.
Especially some of the older medications. I mean, if that's been the case throughout time.
Right. Tylenol can cause organ damage. I mean,
well, yes.
Right. Like all sorts of meds can hurt you just as well as they can help you, right? You can take some painkillers because you have a headache, and that's good. And also, if you take too many or you have a certain predisposition or vulnerability or constitution, it can be harmful to you. So there's that. There's also a lot of critiquing of the methodology of the MAPS clinical studies, which I think is kind of comical because the FDA is aware and it was even collaborative with the creation of this methodology. This is not anything new. I don't know why it's being brought up now. Yeah, sure, it's really hard to double blind a clinical trial for psychedelics, but guess what? They've done it for traditional psych meds. They've done it for ketamine. They've done it for all different types of medications. So again, I don't know why psychedelics are being singled out. I mean, I do know that I've heard rumors that there are other pharmaceutical companies that are trying to develop some form of psychedelic that doesn't have psychedelic effects. And I'm wondering, because I'm a curious person, if this might have anything to do with it. I mean, I don't know, but it's just a thought I had in my head at some point.
I mean, it's a logical one to get to just based on history in general.
Yeah.
It's sad is the word that I'm going to use. There are a number of people that will share their experiences on social media, through their Instagram stories, for example, sometimes TikTok reels, where they talk about psilocybin, their experiences with that and how it has been so life-changing for them, many of them likening it to a spiritual experience.
Mhm.
Higher levels of consciousness, a deeper understanding of their life, their history, and then feeling more whole, after the experience, like just a much deeper sense of self-love and presence in the world. And there are many of those individual testimonies out there. So I really appreciate people who feel like they don't have an anchor and they're really struggling with making sense of themselves, their lives, their symptoms. They've had countless treatments and they seem really stuck. I have so much empathy for those people who are hearing these stories saying, I want to try that.
Yeah.
And today we're saying, oh, sorry, you can't.
Yep. I think there's a very real tension within the scientific community about spiritual experience, about transpersonal experience. I think people are afraid of this. It can't be quantified. And that's another critique of the MAPS methodology, is that they can't quantify everything, that you can't necessarily grid off what happens between a person and their internal system or a person and their therapist if it's good therapy. I don't think the FDA understands therapy. I think they understand substances, but I don't think they understand therapy, especially the type of very relational kind of transpersonal therapy that occurs within the context of psychedelic assisted therapy. I don't think the FDA understands healing. And that's not meant meanly. It's just, I think, a fact that I think they do very well with the things that they do understand. But this is something new. This is something where a lot of things you can't put your finger on.
Yeah.
You can't quantify it. You can't grade it off. You can't say exactly what makes it work. But we do know that it does work.
In so many ways, they have that issue with therapy in general, I feel like, because the things that people will report that feel healing to them are not the things that are rooted in interventions that have been studied.
Right.
Necessarily. Most of them, our personal experience of asking, clients when they're terminating after years of work or whatever, and they're ready to move on, it's, what did you feel was most impactful? They are never the things that I thought,
Yeah.
at all.
Uh,
Never. And sometimes it's something that kind of defies description, this sort of like energetic exchange in the relationship itself in the room. It didn't have anything to do with words or a intellectual understanding or reconceptualization or whatever. It literally was a feeling state that exchanged between two people that felt healing.
yeah, we think that symptom management can be measured and maybe evidence-based, but healing can't be. And they're two very different things. There's this whole push towards everything being evidence-based and measurable, and that's all well and good. But I mean, psychology is at best a soft science. We understand the brain, so we're neurobiologically informed. So there's the science piece. But as far as relational psychology, counseling psychology, people come at it like it's a science, and it's not. It's an art.
Literally was talking with Dr. Jamie Merritt on an episode that she came on, and I was saying, people have heard me say this before, that in the last few years, the interns that have been coming in, and I love training new interns, they have just so much energy and motivation, and they're so passionate, and it's so fun. So many of them have been trained that therapy is a conveyor belt of interventions that you just kind of like plug in depending on like this symptom or that symptom. That's not therapy.
No.
And I agree that that is partly what's coming from insurance companies. Prove that this works. Prove you have this diagnosis, then you have to use this modality. That's not therapy. It's also not lasting.
No. And I'm not saying that CBT and DBT can't be useful.
Right.
I think there's aspects of that in what we do, right? But I don't think those types of modalities are in and of themselves. And people will disagree with me on this, and this is great. It's fine. We can disagree. But I don't believe in and of themselves these modalities are healing. I think they can get people to a place where healing can occur. I think they can be part of the healing. But I don't think that's what does it. I think what happens in relationship, and not just between client and therapist, but client and self or selves.
Yeah.
Really creating a space where people can be with themselves, can be with their very worst moments and find a way through.
Yeah.
We've been very lucky. I don't know where we would be in our life if we'd even be having a life right now if we hadn't stumbled into an extraordinary experience. And I know our experience with MDMA is not everybody's experience. I want to make that one really clear too. It's not always going to go down that way. But it did for us, and it taught us a lot. It taught us a lot about being alive and being human and living with trauma. And it taught us about love.
Which is the basis.
Yeah.
It's the root. It's where we really grow and blossom from.
Yeah.
I'm a little opinionated. Okay.
We like that about you. It's good.
Just offering that fact for folks who haven't picked up on it.
And people can feel free to disagree with what we're saying here. That's fine. We are speaking from our truth and from the truth of so many other people we have had the amazing fortune to be in contact with. And the people that we know who consider themselves healed to a certain degree, it's by relationship.
At the root, I think so many of us are craving the experience of being vulnerably and authentically and truly seen by another and accepted and loved in that state, whatever that state is.
Yeah.
And that's not something that, I mean, I'm a trained DBT therapist. It can be helpful. It's like training wheels on a bike, right? Until you can drive, it can help, it can put some functioning back in place. I remember a time personally where I was like kind of terrified that quote unquote getting better meant that I was just plugging in these different skills.
Yeah.
And that, so I'm always going to feel terrible, but then I have to sort of learn how to navigate this tricycle or this bike with training wheels on it. And I'm not going to actually feel grounded and anchored in something larger than me.
Yeah.
And when I watch people who have these really beautiful, painful, but ultimately in the end, beautiful healing experiences, a lot of their descriptions are things like, I feel like I've come home to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I feel whole, whether they're a system of different alters or they are singletons. I'm not talking about that aspect, but just that sense of wholeness, right? That
Yeah.
I have a sense of purpose. I have this love and compassion for myself that I didn't feel, and I feel connection. I feel able to be connected to others. I've learned to trust my intuition. I've learned to be sometimes embodied, maybe not all the times embodied, but there's so many different things,
Yeah.
which is really different than, okay, I'm distressed. I'm going to plug in tip. I have to have a conversation. I'm going to use Dear Man and I'm going to augment it with Fast and Give. Let me write that out because I can't remember them all.
And sometimes you just need to flip somebody off.
Yes.
Like as we're having this conversation, it's not lost on me that, DBT was created by somebody who is greatly suffering.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And she figured out a way to arrange thoughts and emotions so that she could survive her experience, and it helped her. So boom, it's a thing, which is completely legit. But it's not the end of the story. I feel like that's just the beginning. And
Yeah.
I think DBT, if you really look at anybody who's functional at like at least, I don't know, 50 to 75%, you're going to see some DBT practices in there. You're going to see some self-regulation, communication practices. You're going to see some mindfulness. You're going to see a lot of mindfulness practices. But none of this in and of itself is the thing. It's just all ingredients, just like with psychedelics. I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, I never have a bad day, or I'm never depressed, or I'm never overwhelmed. You bet your ass we are.
Mm-hmm.
We get our fair share of all this stuff too, but we also got a view of ourselves and who we are as a system that allows it to be mostly okay as possible to be us.
I love that you just said that because there are a number of people who believe that healing means your life is always happy, it's always good, you never feel, sad, angry, despair.
No, it just means that you can deal with it.
Right. There's also, I mean, in fairness too, like in addition to that view, there's also the view that somehow therapists always have their shit together all the time and we never feel anything outside of like, I don't know,
I love that one.
capable and like happy
Yeah.
and everything somehow.
3 years of grad school did not absolve us of our humanity.
Thank God, really, in some way.
Right? I really want my money back. But it's not like you go through some sort of a machine that just sucks out all the gritty stuff. It's just maybe, it's like, so I say to people, it's like I'm holding up one hand and it's curled into a fist. It's my left hand. Then I have another hand that I'm cupping over it very closely. And it's like right now, sometimes at some points, the trauma is as big as the fist. And the life is the hand. And no matter where the fist moves, it bumps into the hand and it hurts. It's like an exposed nerve. But the idea is that as you heal, the trauma, the fist might stay the same, but the life gets bigger. So that you're not bumping this with this and bumping off the nerve every time you try to do something. I think to us, that's kind of what healing is that our life is growing big enough to hold our pain.
Yes. And in that life, there are moments of great joy, I'm sure, connection, beauty,
Sorrow. suffering, even in the context of healing.
Mhm.
There's suffering, even in the context of healing. There is the day where you just want to throw yourself on the floor and have a tantrum.
Mhm. Yes.
And that to us is okay. That's part of the package that we signed up for by choosing to be alive.
Those days too, it's really helpful when you have friends that you can send text to and say, I've got crayons and a blanket fort, bring cookies.
Yep. A lot of cookies.
Come spend the day with me in my blanket fort with cookies.
We are very lucky to be married to a very wonderful human being who knows the importance of the blanket fort and cookies and crayons and cats. Lots of cats. Not too many, but cats. Yeah.
Cats are very good.
Yes,
Cats are good. Dogs are good. Fur things are good.
absolutely. They're friends.
So as we sort of wrap up, I wonder if you have thoughts, if people want to, is there a website that somebody could go to learn more about psychedelics that has reliable information on it? And if not off the top of your head, maybe we'll find some for the show notes or some resources in the show notes for people to learn more if they want to do a little bit of reliable research.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to use a lot of different websites. I would encourage anything from the MAPS website to the Zendo project to different authors writing about this to following people on, oh my God, social media who are talking about their experiences. I would encourage people to look at a lot of different resources, a lot of different voices in the conversation. And then when you think you know something, push up against it and make sure you know it. Push up against it, maybe try to disprove it, push up against it, look for the cracks, and really do your homework. You know, it's easy to want to believe in something because it sounds good. It's easy to want to believe in something because maybe nothing else has worked super well, or this sounds really good, or, you know, you're just human and you need relief. And that's all good. But, you know, psychedelics have been used to hurt people
Yeah. Yep.
in so many different ways, and they do have capacity for harm. So I would encourage people not to fall in love with the idea right off the bat, but to really, to the extent of ability to do so, self-educate from a bunch of different sources. Read the stuff that people who are against psychedelics are saying, and then go back and cross-check that information. Read stuff that people who love psychedelics, what they're saying, and push up against that and cross-check that. You know, I'm kind of slightly horrified by some of the claims that are being made on social media about psychedelics, about some people who are saying, yeah, you know, all you have to do is eat a mushroom and your trauma's gone. No, seriously, like, especially on LinkedIn. It's a weird world on LinkedIn with psychedelics these days, but there's a lot of people who are, finger quotes, purveyors of psychedelic substances blatantly on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok and stuff, who are basically making these really false and damaging claims to people that, like, oh, if you have trauma, just, you know, take some DMT. And it's like, oh my God, no, don't. Spoiler alert. Not this week, no. But there's a lot of claims. This is a hot commodity. It's merchandise. It's something that's worth money, especially. I'm not going to say that, but it's something that's worth money. So please engage your critical thought process with this. Get yourself and your system fully engaged with finding out everything you possibly can, and then make an informed decision with as much love and compassion for yourself, yourselves as possible.
Yeah, really big takeaway. Don't rush into it.
No, no, absolutely not. This is a really big thing, but whatever can cause a lot of healing can also cause a lot of harm. And that's really important to be cognizant of.
Being careful, planful, thoughtful, researching, critical thinking, so many good things to think about, understanding what protocols are out there, what should happen, what shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It's not a decision that can be made in 2 days or a week.
Psychedelic use, whether it's recreation or clinical, can have life-changing outcomes. We were lucky. Our life-changing outcome was life-affirming. But sometimes people have really difficult experiences, and if they don't have the benefit of skilled and compassionate integration, things can go very badly. If people are buying, and I'm not saying people should, but if people are experimenting and are buying psychedelics from unknown sources, please look up Dance Safe online and get a test kit. Make sure that there isn't fentanyl in what you're taking. Make sure what you're taking is what you think you are taking. Be as safe as possible. Only do psychedelics around trusted people in predictable and safe enough circumstances. It's not something to do lightly. I mean, we were very lucky that the person who initially shared MDMA with us was an ethical person who had what was actually MDMA. This could have gone very differently for us, and we are very aware of that.
Really important for people to bear in mind when they're making plans or moving forward.
Yeah.
This has been so great.
Yeah.
It's so helpful.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming on. Truly, it's been a really great conversation, and we hit on so many important topics that I think will be really validating for people and informative, and we'll have some folks thinking.
Yeah, I hope so. I think we need to listen with open minds and open hearts on this. And for folks in Massachusetts, look out for the ballot initiative for plant-based medicines. This is really, really important.
And vote.
And vote. Yes, sorry. Vote.
And vote. That's a perfect note to end on. Thank
It
you.
is. Thank you.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. We hope you found the conversation helpful, validating, and valuable. Please share with anyone you think might benefit, and don't forget to check the show notes for links to resources for you. Until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care. Nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.